Hi, everybody. My name is Eugene. I'm the co-founder of Ellipsis Labs. And we are all about building high-performance DeFi. I'm really excited to share our vision for the company with you guys all today. So we are core contributors to Phoenix, which is a limit order book spot DEX on Solana. It's completely on-chain. So the order book you see here is just updating live directly on the Solana blockchain. Apologies. So like I said, Phoenix is fully on-chain. The entire order book state, the entire matching engine lives on the blockchain. We've done over $20 billion in cumulative spot volume. Actually, that number today is over $24 billion. And we are in the top 5 by daily spot volume across all blockchains. And the thing that we find most important about Phoenix today is the active market makers on the exchange are profitable without external incentives. So the exchange today is operating in a sustainable state. There's no unsustainable incentives coming into play to juice the volume numbers. And so today, what I want to talk about is our vision for the future of DeFi, because we think Phoenix today is not good enough. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a quick history lesson on the history of DeFi. So early DeFi was really enabled by the launch of Ethereum L1, which was the first general purpose computing, decentralized computing environment that was available. And so that enabled the DeFi pioneers like Uniswap and Maker and Aave to deploy their initial programs. And these were really proofs of concept that you can put a financial system on chain. You can put these financial primitives, and they inherit a lot of these properties from the L1 itself. So all of these products are trustless, they're auditable, they're fully censorship resistant, at least to the extent that the underlying layer 1 is. And beyond being just these proofs of concept, they also showed these net new use cases. So Uniswap showed that you can actually have an exchange, you can actually have liquidity without relying on a centralized exchange to list your token, without relying on having a market maker to provide liquidity. Aave and Compound really showed that you can have lending fully on-chain without any trust involved, which is definitely a net new use case. But again, these protocols are really proofs of concept. This is really early DeFi. And they were constrained by the limitations of Ethereum, which does around 20 transactions per second across the entire state machine. And so these came out in the 2016 to 2017 era of DeFi. And there's been a lot of progress on blockchain infrastructure since that early era of DeFi. But the core DeFi protocols themselves have not actually improved very much. So we've seen some movement in DeFi in the 2020-21 cycle, as well as some more in this current cycle. But at the core protocol level, these have really been marginal improvements. So moving from XY equals K to concentrated liquidity, most of the innovation here is still happening on Ethereum mainnet. And the protocols that are moving to the layer 2s, which are more performant blockchains, they have more block space and lower fees, lower latency. Most of the dominant DeFi protocols on these layer 2s are pretty much copy-paste from the protocols in Ethereum, which in my mind kind of defeats the purpose of the better infra. If you have better infra, then you really should be able to enable a new set of applications that are uniquely enabled by the improved infrastructure. And there's even this school of thought today called shitcoin nihilism, which is looking at the current state of the market where there really is just a lot of on-chain gambling. And in my mind, it's this really, really pessimistic view. It says that there's no way DeFi is ever going to be better than traditional finance. We shouldn't even try. That goal is way too ambitious. The only net new thing that we're going to create with crypto are these shitcoins. And the future of DeFi really is just this casino that is enabled by regulatory arbitrage today. And I think this is what we see in the market right now. But it's an extremely pessimistic view of the future. And so we really are at this crossroads. where on the one hand, you have DeFi dystopia, which is this world where there's not going to be any more innovation in crypto. Really, the most important thing that is happening is we built this decentralized casino, which has some semblance of product market fit, very real product market fit in these Ponzi games and these new meme coins. But I think the future is a lot brighter. And this DeFi Utopia we love to talk about at Ellipsis Labs is really this long-term view that we can actually build a decentralized financial system that is better than the traditional financial system. And there's a lot that has to happen along the way, but I think the path is actually very tractable. So I'm going to go into how we think this is going to happen. So first, we need to take a look at what some of the problems are in traditional finance today, and then where DeFi has strong advantages over traditional finance. So in TradFi today, we have this big system. It's global in scale, but it's inefficient in many ways. And it all comes down to the fact that traditional finance has evolved in this iterative way over 100 years, where equity in companies was literally represented as slips of paper that people would hold in safety deposit boxes. To do a trade, the settlement time would be very long because you don't even have any sort of electronic rails whatsoever. And this is not the world we live in today. But any system that's been built up over so long just has all of this scar tissue inside the system, which we would call on the engineering side like technical debt. Any engineering system that's so big and has been around for so long and hasn't really been refactored or rebuilt from the ground up is just going to be really, really slow and hard to change. The system itself also is highly regulated. There's all these entrenched middlemen, and they have veto power over any changes. So it really, really blocks any sort of innovation or even attempts to innovate within the traditional financial system. And that means there's not much opportunity for new ideas, where if someone has a good new idea or even a bad new idea on how we're going to change something in finance, some experiment they want to run, it's extremely difficult under the traditional system. Now, DeFi has a bunch of advantages. So the ones that folks generally like to talk about are DeFi offers permissionless access. The protocols themselves can be trustless, which means they're going to be auditable, where the source code deterministically compiles down to this bytecode that lives on chain. And they have access to this composable shared state. I think the most important piece is permissionless innovation, where on these decentralized rails, someone can deploy like a brand new exchange primitive, like a single developer can deploy one within weeks and just see what happens. With Phoenix, we built the original prototype in 6 months and just deployed it to mainnet when we were ready. Just like, we're going to see what happens. And this is something that just would have been totally impossible in the traditional world. So I've spoken a lot about DeFi being a better system than traditional finance. And so we need to talk about some of the metrics that I care about. So first is efficiency, where for a trading protocol, what this means is the prices that are getting offered to the retail users are as good as possible. So this means really tight spreads on trading pairs, as well as deep liquidity. And we want to get to a spot where the liquidity is better than what exists on centralized exchanges. And then there's this component of sustainability, which I touched on before. It's not like the ESG sense of sustainability. It's that the protocol needs to be self-sustaining. So the protocol can't depend on these external incentives forever, which we see a lot in DeFi with these token incentives, where the product looks like it has product market fit, it does a lot of volume, it has a lot of TVL, and then when the incentives dry up, all of that goes away. So there was never actually any real product market fit. And the key insight here is we haven't really innovated too much on the protocol layer since this 2017 era of DeFi, but the infra itself has actually improved a ton. So there should be a lot of room to build better primitives, build more efficient, sustainable financial primitives that are unlocked by this high throughput infrastructure. So like I said before, we really view Phoenix, which is a limit order book on Solana doing hundreds of millions of dollars in daily volume, completely unincentivized. We really view this as a proof of concept, just the first step on this long path to building a future for DeFi, where we've proved that active liquidity can outperform passive liquidity on chain. And again, by outperformance, Here, I mean, Phoenix market makers can offer better prices than the AMMs while still being profitable, while still being sustainable. But clearly, what we have right now is just not good enough to displace traditional finance because it's the same primitive that exists on these centralized venues, a limit order book, and it just happens to be on-chain. So it's definitely going to be less efficient because the market makers are competing in a more difficult, more expensive environment. So we need to do better than Phoenix today. So I've talked a little bit about infra. So we have Ethereum mainnet today, which does around 20 transactions per second. We have Solana, which does around 1,000 transactions per second. Then cost to land a transaction will be anywhere from less than 1 cent on Solana up to dollars or double-digit dollars on Ethereum. And compared to centralized infra, this is around 1,000 times worse, which is pretty bad. I don't think we'll ever be able to get this number down to 1x, but we should be able to get it down to 10x to 100x. And I think the path is relatively clear. And the goals here are we need to be able to get to tens of thousands of TPS, where you can really support active liquidity across many different assets, across many different protocols. And you need the block space to be so abundant that the cost per transaction is under 1/10 of a cent per transaction. Latency is also extremely important, where you want the latency for pre-confirmations to be as quick as possible, ideally under 100 milliseconds, ideally significantly lower than that. And we still need to preserve all the advantages we talked about of building on top of decentralized infrastructure. So it still needs to be sufficiently censorship resistant. It still needs to be auditable and trustless. And so there's a couple different paths that we're seeing in the market today to scaling the infrastructure, continuing to improve the infra. The first is via more performant layer ones. So this is the approach that blockchains like Solana and Monad are taking, where you really push the boundaries on hardware. You really push the boundaries on software to get to like the final form of a performant proof of stake system. And then the other way to scale is via layer twos, where there definitely is a trade-off. You're trading off short-term censorship resistance for a ton of performance on a centralized or slowly rotating sequencer. And the path to scaling the L2s is quite clear, where we have these alt-DA solutions like Celestia and EigenDA that are really scaling DA beyond what Ethereum mainnet can provide. And on the execution side, there's a bunch of different things that are getting experimented with today. We have these general execution environments where you're going to maximize composability. And then you also have more application-specific execution environments where you'll get better performance and sacrifice some composability. But there's very credible paths here to getting to tens of thousands of transactions per second. So once the infra is built out, and it's getting into a relatively mature stage today, now we need to get into the meat of the DeFi protocol design, where we need these primitives that actually derive more efficiency from better infrastructure, where, again, I think the limit order book is just not going to be good enough. And here, we really need to lean into the properties of DeFi that make it unique to TradFi, because remember, we're going to be eating this 10 to 100x performance hit relative to traditional finance. So we need to make up for it in terms of better protocol design, faster iteration, and a couple things that I think make obvious sense for a trading primitive are programmable liquidity and more expressive order types. These are the types of things that would be very difficult to implement on a centralized exchange. Certainly wouldn't be able to move as quickly as on a decentralized venue. On the leverage side, today in the market, we mostly see clones of this Aave protocol, which came out in 2016. There's been some minor improvements on that. But with a really performant base layer, you can have Oracle updates every half a second, every 1/10 of a second. You can provide much more efficient leverage. You can have actual markets for credit that we don't see in DeFi today. And that results in a lot of inefficiency in the current market. So this is what we're working on here at Ellipsis Labs. We're working on everything across the stack on the infra side as well as on the protocol design side. If you are interested in building this future, this optimistic future for DeFi, you can get in touch with me here. We're hiring across basically all business functions in our office in New York City. Thank you.